Welcome to Declassified Deep Dive, where unredacted files reveal hidden truths. Let's uncover the secrets. I'm your host, Raj, and each week we explore a new secret deep dive.
So we left off talking about the impacts, the far-reaching impacts of Operation Paperclip. But it makes you wonder, were there any real attempts to hold these Nazi scientists accountable? I mean, beyond just, sweeping their past under the rug with this file purification.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were some efforts at denazification,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
they were often, pretty inconsistent, and they didn't have a lot of teeth, And you have to remember the U.S. was laser focused on winning the Cold War, right?
Yeah.
And so exploiting the expertise of these scientists, it often took priority over pursuing justice for the crimes that they had committed.
So it was basically a matter of, looking the other way for the sake of, expediency, winning the Cold War.
Yeah, in many cases, that's exactly what it was, and as we talked about earlier, some high-ranking officials like Alan Dulles, they went out of their way to shield certain scientists from prosecution.
Right.
They saw them as too valuable, regardless of what they had done in the past.
It sounds like, the desire for justice and the realities of the Cold War were really at odds with each other.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there.
But what about the American public? Did they know? Did they know that these former Nazis were, working in their midst, contributing to, all these scientific advancements?
The thing is, Operation Paperclip, it was a highly classified program.
Oh,
It was shrouded in secrecy for decades. It didn't really come to light until the 1990s when all these declassified documents were finally released and people started to get a glimpse of what had actually gone on.
So for years, people were completely unaware of this operation and everything that it entailed.
That's right. And even when, information did start to emerge, there was a lot of disbelief, even outright denial. I mean, a lot of people, they couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that their government would willingly employ individuals who had been part of such a horrific regime.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to reconcile those two things. The image of America as this beacon of freedom and justice, and then this dark secret.
Right. It challenges our perceptions for sure.
One of the sources that I came across mentions this really chilling detail. The alleged involvement of former Nazi doctors in the CIA's MKUltra program.
Oh, yeah. MKUltra.
I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a conspiracy theory.
It does sound like that.
Yeah.
But, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.
Right.
MKUltra, it was a real program. It was this top secret CIA project that was, looking into mind control, psychological manipulation.
Wow.
And yes, some former Nazi doctors with their, disturbing expertise in human experimentation, they were reportedly involved in the early stages of the program.
I mean, it's a disturbing thought. These doctors who were already complicit in horrific war crimes, now they're helping to develop, methods of mind control.
Right.
It's a pretty dark chapter in American history.
It is. It's a dark chapter. It raises serious ethical questions about, where do we draw the line when it comes to scientific inquiry,
Yeah.
and what happens when power is abused, MKUltra it's a prime example of how Cold War anxieties could lead to some very morally questionable decisions.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like Operation Paperclip it opened up this Pandora's box of ethical dilemmas,
Yeah.
each one more troubling than the last.
It's true.
But what about the individuals involved, the scientists themselves? Did any of them ever, express remorse or take responsibility for what they had done?
A lot of them, they claim that they were just following orders, right? That they were just carrying out their duties as scientists. But, but can that really absolve them of their complicity in the atrocities that were committed by the Nazi regime?
That's a question that's, haunted us since the Nuremberg trials. To what extent can individuals be held accountable when they're operating within a system that demands obedience, even when what they're being asked to do is morally repugnant?
Yeah, it's a tough question. One of our sources quotes Albert Einstein,
Okay.
who famously fled Nazi Germany before the war. And he lamented that, science and justice were now in the hands of a raw and rabid mob of Nazi militia.
Wow, that's That's a pretty scathing indictment coming from one of the greatest scientific minds of all time.
It is. It is. And Einstein, he really understood the dangers of allowing science to be corrupted by ideology and power.
Yeah.
He knew that true justice required accountability, not just for the people who give the orders, but for those who carry them out,
Right.
regardless of their profession or their expertise.
Sure. It's a sobering thought for sure. It makes you wonder, did the U.S. ultimately benefit from Operation Paperclip, despite all of these ethical compromises? I mean, did it give the U.S. this technological edge that they were looking for in the Cold War?
That's a really difficult question to answer definitively.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt that Operation Paperclip contributed significantly to American advancements in rocketry, in aerospace engineering, and medicine.
Right.
But the question is, did those achievements come at too high a price?
So the U.S. may have gained a technological edge, but did they also tarnish their moral standing on the world stage by doing so?
Right, and that's a question that historians and ethicists continue to debate.
Yeah.
Did the U.S. by offering refuge and opportunity to former Nazis, did they undermine their own values? Did they undermine their own credibility as this champion of freedom and human rights?
Yeah.
And did it set this dangerous precedent for future actions? This idea that national security could be used to justify overlooking past atrocities.
Right. These are questions that go way beyond just, the specifics of Operation Paperclip. They speak to this larger issue of how we reconcile our pursuit of progress, our pursuit of security with the demands of justice and moral accountability.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a reminder that history is not just a collection of facts and dates. It's a tapestry of choices and consequences and these enduring moral dilemmas. It challenges us to look beyond these simplistic narratives of good and evil and confront the uncomfortable realities of human nature, both in the past and in the present.
And it makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently? What if the U.S. had chosen not to recruit these scientists? How might the course of history have been altered?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it? I mean, would the Soviets have acquired those scientists? Would they have gotten that knowledge? Would the Cold War have played out differently? Would the space race have had a different outcome?
Or maybe the world would be a safer place, free from the threat of nuclear annihilation.
It's possible. It's possible. But counterfactual history it's inherently speculative, right? I mean, we can never know for sure what might have been, but what we can say with certainty is that Operation Paperclip, it was this pivotal moment in history.
Yeah.
And it continues to shape our understanding of science and ethics and the complexities of international relations.
As we dig deeper into the story, I can't help but think about the individuals whose lives were directly impacted by Operation Paperclip.
Of course.
The scientists, the victims, their families, they all have stories to tell.
Absolutely. And it's so important to remember that history is ultimately about people, not just about abstract concepts and geopolitical maneuverings. Those individual stories, they're crucial to understanding the true cost of something like Operation Paperclip.
One of the sources that I read describes an author who interviewed a former slave laborer from Middle Baldora.
Wow.
And the man showed the author his camp tattoo. Just this permanent reminder of the horrors that he had endured.
It's these kinds of stories that really bring history to life. That make it visceral and personal. They remind us that behind the grand narratives and the technological advancements, there were real people who suffered unimaginable cruelty, whose lives were irrevocably altered by the events that we're talking about.
It's a really sobering thought, and it makes me think about the lasting legacy of Operation Paperclip, not just on a global scale, but on a personal level.
Yeah.
How did this program shape the lives of those who were involved, both the perpetrators and the victims?
That's a great question. And it's one that deserves further exploration, I think. For the scientists, it it offered them a chance at redemption in
Yeah.
a way, right?
Right
A
on
way
it.
to rebuild their lives, to contribute to a new world order. But for many victims, it was a source of ongoing pain and resentment. This bitter reminder that justice was never fully served.
One of our sources mentions that some of these scientists, even after coming to the U.S., they continued to downplay or even deny their involvement in Nazi atrocities.
Yeah, it's a common human response to trauma and guilt, right? To minimize or to rationalize our actions, especially when those actions are morally reprehensible.
Right.
It's a way of protecting ourselves from the full weight of our past.
But it also makes, true reconciliation and closure almost impossible.
It does.
It leaves this wound that just continues to fester.
Yeah. Yeah, and it speaks to the enduring power of the past, how it
Yeah.
continued to shape individual lives and collective consciousness long after the events themselves have faded from memory.
One of the sources that we have for this episode focuses on the descendants of these Nazi scientists,
Wow.
some of whom are still grappling with their family history and the legacy of Operation Paperclip. It's a reminder that the past is never truly past, right?
Never.
It continues to influence the present in really profound ways.
Absolutely. And it raises these really challenging questions about inherited guilt and responsibility.
Yeah.
To what extent are we as descendants, are we accountable for the actions of our ancestors? How do we reconcile their achievements with their transgressions?
These are really weighty questions with no easy answers.
Yeah.
But they're questions worth thinking about as we try to understand this really complex history and the enduring legacy of Operation Paperclip.
And it's not just about the past, right? It's about understanding the present and navigating the future. As we develop new technologies, as we confront new threats, as we grapple with this balance between security and freedom, the lessons of Operation Paperclip, they remain vitally relevant.
Speaking of lessons, remember that anecdote about the Nazi spy who lost that suitcase full of top secret documents?
Oh, yeah.
The one that got switched with the pajamas?
Pajamas, yeah, I remember that.
It's kind of a humorous incident in a way, but it also highlights this element of chance and contingency that often shapes the course of history.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like a choose your own adventure story.
Totally.
Where every decision, every seemingly insignificant event can send the narrative spiraling down a totally different path.
That's a great analogy. And in the case of Operation Paperclip, the path that was chosen, it led us to a world of technological marvels and geopolitical tension and these profound ethical dilemmas that we're still wrestling with today.
Yeah, it's a legacy that continues to resonate both in the realm of science and in our collective understanding of morality and responsibility and the choices that we make as individuals and as a nation. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, it's important to acknowledge that there were voices of dissent. There were individuals who dared to challenge the status quo and speak out against Operation Paperclip, even when it was dangerous to do so.
Absolutely. Their stories deserve to be heard. Their courage deserves to be recognized. And we'll do just that in part 3 when we shine a light on those who fought for accountability and justice in the face of immense power and secrecy.
We've uncovered a lot about Operation Paperclip, but we haven't talked much about the people who opposed it.
Yeah, not everyone was on board with this whole bringing Nazis to America thing.
Right. So who were these people who, dared to challenge this?
Well, one of the most outspoken critics was a guy named Charles Allen Jr. He was a counterintelligence officer with the CIA.
Okay.
And he became really disillusioned with the agency's, reliance on former Nazis. He saw it as this betrayal of American values, a real threat to national security.
So he was seeing this all firsthand, working inside the CIA.
Exactly. He was right there in the thick of it.
Wow.
And he wasn't shy about raising concerns, He wrote all these memos, criticized the program, said it was morally wrong and strategically short-sighted.
That must have taken a lot of guts, especially in an organization like the CIA.
Oh, absolutely. And it didn't exactly make him popular.
Yeah, what happened to him?
Well, let's just say his career in the CIA didn't last very long. Yeah, he was basically forced out for speaking truth to power.
So he paid a price for his principles.
He did. But his story, it's a powerful reminder that dissent is crucial, right?
Right.
Especially when it comes to something as big as Operation Paperclip. It's easy to just go with the flow, but real progress needs people like Alan who are willing to ask tough questions and hold people accountable.
So were there others who spoke out against it?
Yeah, there were some journalists who started investigating the program,
Okay.
and they faced a lot of pushback, a lot of attempts to keep everything quiet.
It's amazing how persistent some journalists can be.
Oh, yeah. They play such an important role. They dig into these dark corners, expose the secrets, keep those in power in check.
Hmm.
And it was their work